The moment that stopped an airport, a fallen soldier's final journey. Welcome to our channel. We're so glad you're here with us today. Before we dive into this incredible story, we want to hear from you. Drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. Whether you're across the globe or just around the corner, we'd love to know. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on tomorrow's special story. We're bringing you stories that inspire, engage, and spark deep conversation, and we can't wait for you to be part of it all. Let's get started. It was a day like any other in Heathrow Terminal 5, bustling with the usual rush of travelers, flight announcements, and the constant hum of activity. But for Sergeant Lawson, it was anything but ordinary. As he walked through the terminal, the polished black soles of his shoes echoed on the gleaming floor. His scarlet uniform stood out in stark contrast to the sea of casual travelers, with his tall, impressive figure made even more striking by the bearskin cap that added nearly a foot to his height. The weight of the flag-draped casket in his hands was heavy, not just physically, but emotionally. With each step, he felt the burden of a promise made to a fallen comrade. Lieutenant Matt Harrison had been his closest friend, his brother in arms. They had fought side by side, shared countless hours of training, and faced danger together in some of the most volatile parts of the world. But now, after a tragic operation, Matt was gone, and Lawson was fulfilling the promise he had made to bring his friend home with full honors. As Lawson moved through the terminal with unwavering discipline, the world around him seemed to pause. The usual clatter of voices faded as the honor guard procession caught the attention of those nearby. Travelers halted in their tracks, conversations dying down, and even children's questions were hushed by their parents. People instinctively recognized the gravity of what was passing before them, and in that silence, Lawson's composed presence only seemed to intensify. However, not everyone seemed to understand the importance of the moment. Richard Barnes, the operations manager at Heathrow, was not one for sentimentality. His navy suit was impeccable, but his tie hung slightly askew as he hurried toward Lawson with impatience. "Excuse me," came Barnes's clipped voice, "but you really need to pick up the pace here." Lawson didn't falter. His face remained a mask of controlled composure as he continued walking at the deliberate pace befitting the occasion. Barnes, tapping impatiently at the tablet he held, continued, "We have 3 international flights deplaning, and this main concourse needs to remain clear. You need to expedite this procession." The demand, spoken as if it were a mere inconvenience, felt like an affront to Lawson. His jaw tightened imperceptibly, but his gaze stayed ahead, unwavering. "Sir," he replied calmly but with authority, "this is Lieutenant Matt Harrison of the Royal Marines. We will proceed at the appropriate pace for escorting the fallen." Barnes glanced at the Union Jack draped over the casket. He looked back at Lawson, frustration evident in his tone. "Yes, and I respect that, but surely you understand the needs of an airport. We can arrange a more efficient route through our service corridors." But Lawson's response was resolute. "That won't be possible, sir," he said. "Lieutenant Harrison will be escorted with full honors through the main terminal, as arranged and approved by airport administration." A family stood near the windows, a poignant image of military pride. The elderly man, his military bearing still strong despite his years, stood with a sense of reverence. His medals glinted in the soft light. Beside him, a woman placed an arm around a young girl. Their eyes were fixed on the flag-draped casket, understanding the deep emotions shared by military families. It was a silent acknowledgement of sacrifice. Barnes, undeterred, raised his voice, now louder and more forceful. "I don't care what was arranged," he snapped. "This is disrupting operations." Before Lawson could respond, a calm voice intervened. "Mr. Barnes," came the voice of Isabel Chambers, an airport security officer. She stepped forward, her eyes flicking from the casket to the waiting family. "Perhaps I could speak with you for a moment." Barnes dismissed her with a quick glance. "In a minute, Chambers. I'm handling a situation here." He turned back to Lawson, now insistent. "Officer, I'm trying to be reasonable, but if you continue to disrupt operations," Winslow interrupted. "Lieutenant Harrison gave his life in service to the Crown," he said firmly. "He will be escorted with the dignity his sacrifice deserves." The procession continued, undeterred by the growing tension. As they passed, the crowd instinctively stepped back. Many bowed their heads in respect, recognizing the solemnity of the moment. The young girl, Emma, clutched her mother's hand, tightly, watching with an understanding beyond her years. Sergeant Lawson knew this was not just another military duty. This was personal. Matt Harrison had been more than a colleague. He had been a friend. They had served together in Afghanistan, faced the unimaginable, and now Lawson was fulfilling a promise made in the dark hours of battle. As they moved through the terminal, each step felt like a weighty fulfillment of that promise. But Barnes wasn't done. He pushed forward, trying again to assert his control, but as the tension mounted, the procession remained firm in its course. The day was not about efficiency or protocol. It was about honoring the fallen, preserving dignity in the face of bureaucratic challenge. The truth was, some things simply couldn't be rushed. As Sergeant Lawson continued his solemn march through the terminal, the tension between him and Richard Barnes grew thicker with every step. Barnes's voice, now tinged with frustration, cut through the air. "Sir, I understand your desire to honor the fallen, but this is an airport, not a military base. The rules here exist for a reason." His voice, once sharp, now faltered as he realized that the quiet resolve of the honor guard was not something easily swayed. Lawson's gaze remained unbroken, his face stoic, his stride never wavering. "This is Lieutenant Matt Harrison of the Royal Marines. You will not rush this," he said, his voice unwavering but laced with an authority that left no room for debate. The sharp contrast between his disciplined composure and Barnes's increasingly desperate tone was impossible to ignore. Barnes, however, wasn't ready to back down. His fingers, now tapping furiously on his tablet, glinted with impatience as he raised his voice again. "You're holding up the entire terminal. People have flights to catch and you're blocking everything. There's protocol for this. If you don't redirect now, I'll have to call security." His words hung heavy in the air, and a ripple of tension passed through the crowd that had gathered. But Sergeant Lawson didn't falter. "Your protocol doesn't apply here," Lawson countered, his tone calm yet firm. "Military funerals follow different rules. Section 22A of airport policy specifically states that military escort routes through public terminals are non-negotiable for honor guards. This route was approved long before today. We will proceed as planned." Barnes's face flushed crimson as the words sank in. He had miscalculated. The moment he stepped in front of the procession, trying to physically block the honor guard's path, it was clear. This wasn't just a matter of airport procedure anymore. It was about something far greater: honor, respect, and the duty to uphold the dignity of the fallen. With every step, the crowd seemed to grow more aware of the standoff unfolding before them. Some tourists, initially oblivious, now stood in hushed silence, phones lowered, eyes fixed on the intense exchange between the airport manager and the stoic honor guard. Even children, curious at first, seemed to sense the significance of the moment, their usual chatter silenced by the gravity in the air. Barnes took a step closer, his frustration mounting. "You're making this much bigger than it is. Just follow the damn rules." His voice cracked as he raised his hands, directing his staff to form a barrier at the entrance to the service corridor. His movements were frantic, almost desperate. He was losing control, but he wasn't ready to admit defeat. But Lawson, unfazed, responded with the kind of precision and authority that only a soldier could. "This is not about you, Mr. Barnes. This is not about the rules you've memorized. This is about a man who gave his life for others." His voice, quiet but firm, rang through the terminal, challenging the very essence of Barnes's authority. "And Lieutenant Harrison will not be disrespected." As the words left Lawson's mouth, Barnes's eyes widened. He had underestimated the power of duty, the power of sacrifice. And in that moment, something shifted in the terminal. The audience that had been watching from the sidelines now became part of something larger than themselves. They weren't just witnessing an airport protocol dispute. They were witnessing a battle for respect and honor. Barnes's face twisted with disbelief as he tried again, stepping directly into Lawson's path. "You will redirect or I will call security." His voice now held a mixture of outrage and humiliation. But before he could take another step, Lawson's white-gloved hand shot out, gripping Barnes's wrist with such sudden precision that it left everyone in the terminal breathless. The tension in the air was thick, as if the entire airport had stopped moving. The distant sounds of rushing footsteps, murmured conversations, and the hum of travelers' voices all faded into a sharp, suffocating silence. Barnes tried to pull away, but Lawson's grip was ironclad, his expression unwavering. "You will not touch that flag, sir." Lawson's voice was steady, filled with a quiet but undeniable power. The room seemed to hold its breath, the very air thick with the weight of his words. And in that moment, Barnes understood. This wasn't about an airport manager asserting authority. This was about something far more profound. Lawson's grip remained firm, yet controlled. It wasn't violent, but it was unyielding. "This flag," Lawson continued, his eyes locking onto Barnes with intensity, "is the flag that Lieutenant Matt Harrison served under. The same flag that now honors his sacrifice. You will not dishonor it, and you will not disrespect his memory." Barnes, his face flushed with embarrassment, stumbled backward. He hadn't expected this level of resistance. He hadn't expected Lawson to stand so firm, so immovable. The realization hit him hard. His protocol had no place here, not when it came to something as sacred as honoring a fallen hero. The room remained still, with the quiet murmurs of approval rippling through the crowd. What had started as an airport procedure had become a lesson in respect, sacrifice, and the unyielding power of military tradition. The honor guard had made their stand, and there was no turning back. The tension in the air was thick, palpable. As Sergeant Lawson stood unwavering, his eyes locked on Barnes. For a moment, the whole terminal seemed to be holding its breath. Travelers who had once rushed past now paused, sensing that something much greater than just an airport procedure was unfolding before them. Barnes, caught off guard by Lawson's resolve, struggled to regain his composure. He pulled at his wrist but found no way to break the steel grip of the sergeant. The operation manager's face twisted in frustration. He was used to getting things done his way, and the audacity of this military escort, refusing to bend to his will, infuriated him. His gaze darted to the crowd, some of whom were beginning to murmur among themselves, their heads tilting in sympathy for the honor guard. Barnes took another step forward, his voice now shaking with a mixture of desperation and anger. "You're making a scene, Sergeant. This is an airport. I don't care who you're escorting. I have a job to do, and this disruption is unacceptable." But Lawson, as steady as ever, didn't flinch. His voice was calm, but it carried the weight of a man who had seen things most people could never imagine. "This isn't about you, Mr. Barnes. This is about a fallen hero, a man who gave his life for others, and you will not dishonor his sacrifice." His words hung heavy in the air, like a solemn oath. Barnes's eyes flickered with doubt as the crowd began to murmur more loudly now, people inching forward to witness the standoff. The silence was broken only by the soft tap of Barnes's shoes against the terminal floor as he turned his attention to the staff behind him. He gestured, trying to rally his support. "I need security here now," he barked. But as his command echoed across the concourse, a surprising voice interrupted. "Mr. Barnes," came a cool, authoritative tone. It was Isabel Chambers, the airport security officer who had quietly observed the scene unfolding. Her voice was calm, but there was no mistaking the authority in her words. "Perhaps it's time you stepped back." Barnes turned to her, his face flushed with irritation. "What are you talking about? I'm handling this. They need to move now." Isabel's gaze flicked to the casket, then back to Barnes. "No, you're not handling it. This man," she nodded toward Lawson, "is doing exactly what he was asked to do, what he promised to do. You can't just walk over that, not today. Barnes bristled, but for a moment, his eyes lost their sharpness. A flicker of realization passed through him. He wasn't just fighting Lawson now. He was fighting the weight of history, of sacrifice, and the eyes of hundreds of travelers watching intently. Sergeant Lawson didn't say a word. His attention remained fixed forward, the rhythm of his steps a constant reminder of the solemn duty he was carrying out. The honor guard was not to be swayed. The tension between him and Barnes was palpable, but Lawson's discipline and poise never faltered. Barnes, realizing he was losing the battle, took a step back. His frustration was clear, but the quiet, composed presence of the honor guard left him with little room to argue further. He motioned to his staff, who reluctantly parted to allow the procession to continue. The crowd, sensing a shift, began to whisper among themselves, the weight of the moment not lost on them. Even those who had been impatient moments ago were now standing at attention, some with their heads bowed in respect. As the procession moved forward, Sergeant Lawson kept his eyes on the horizon, determined to fulfill his promise to his fallen friend. Behind him, the family of Lieutenant Harrison watched with silent reverence. The elderly man, standing tall despite his years, fixed his gaze on the approaching casket. His medals gleamed under the harsh fluorescent lights, a testament to his own service and sacrifices made in years past. But it was the young girl, Emma, who captured the hearts of everyone nearby. As she watched the honor guard march with precision, her small hand lifted instinctively, giving a salute that was at once innocent and profoundly moving. Her mother, Rebecca, watched with tears in her eyes, pride and sorrow mixing in her heart. She whispered softly to her daughter, "This is how we honor heroes, sweetheart." Barnes, still lingering at the edge of the crowd, watched Emma's salute. The sight of the little girl, her innocent gesture, struck him deeply. It was a reminder of what was truly at stake here. He had been so consumed by rules and regulations that he had lost sight of the human element, the reason behind the procession. The military's tradition was not just about ceremony, but about honoring the selfless sacrifice of those who gave everything for others. The honor guard, steady and unwavering, continued their march. As they neared the end of the terminal, a path cleared in front of them. The crowd had stepped aside, forming a silent corridor of respect. The quiet reverence in the air was almost palpable, and the earlier tensions seemed to dissipate, replaced by a shared understanding of what truly mattered. And as the final steps of the procession echoed through the terminal, even Richard Barnes found himself standing at attention, a subtle shift in his expression marking the moment when the weight of honor and sacrifice finally sank in. As the honor guard continued their deliberate march through the terminal, the tension that had once gripped the space began to shift. Sergeant Lawson, his pace unbroken, moved with an air of quiet dignity, his every step a fulfillment of a promise he had made to his fallen comrade. The weight of Lieutenant Matt Harrison's casket felt as heavy as the bond they had shared, forged through years of combat, camaraderie, and mutual respect. This wasn't just a military escort. It was a final, sacred mission. Behind them, Barnes stood rigidly, his frustration still bubbling beneath the surface. He had tried everything, asserting his authority, calling for security, blocking the path. But now, he was a bystander. And the silence surrounding him, broken only by the rhythmic sound of the honor guard's march, was deafening. In that moment, it wasn't just about airport operations anymore. It was about something much bigger, something he could no longer ignore. The crowd, which had once been scattered and uncertain, now stood together, united in respect. The atmosphere had transformed. The hurried travelers, who just moments ago had been focused solely on catching their next flight, now paused in reverence, understanding that they were witnessing a rare and meaningful moment. They formed a corridor of respect, stepping back from the path of the procession, some bowing their heads, others instinctively placing their hands over their hearts. The simple dignity of the moment had captivated them all, rendering their earlier concerns irrelevant. The family of Lieutenant Harrison stood at the front of the crowd, unmoving, their faces etched with both pride and grief. Thomas Harrison, the father, stood with the strength of a man who had seen war and loss but still carried the weight of military tradition with pride. His weathered hands, once used to holding a rifle, were now stiff at his sides, his posture as straight as the medals pinned to his chest. Beside him, Rebecca, the mother, gently guided their daughter, Emma, into position. The young girl, no older than 10, watched the procession with wide, curious eyes. Emma had heard the stories of her uncle's bravery, of his sacrifices in faraway lands, but today, in this moment, she was witnessing it all firsthand. As the procession neared them, Emma, with the innocence only a child could have, suddenly lifted her small hand and saluted. It wasn't a perfect salute, but it was heartfelt. A simple, unpracticed gesture that seemed to echo the weight of what was happening. The quiet dignity of her salute caught the attention of those around her. For a moment, even Barnes, standing off to the side, forgot himself. He had been so consumed with protocol and procedure that he hadn't stopped to consider the significance of what this family was enduring. Sergeant Lawson, his gaze focused ahead, took in the scene. He had seen death in all its forms, on the battlefield, in the heat of combat. But this was different. This was about the lives that death left behind, the families, the promises, the sacrifices. He could feel the weight of the moment in his bones as he carried the flag-draped casket forward, one step after another, his feet in perfect rhythm with the somber occasion. And then, just as the procession was nearing its final destination, the tension that had been simmering beneath, the surface finally reached its breaking point. Barnes, unable to accept his defeat, took a step forward. He still wasn't ready to let go of his authority, not completely. His face was flushed with embarrassment and rage, and his voice cracked as he spoke. "This is ridiculous," he muttered, almost to himself. "You've had your moment." But before Barnes could make another move, Thomas Harrison, the father, stepped forward. His eyes, still sharp despite the years, locked onto Barnes with a look that spoke volumes. "That flag," Thomas said, his voice steady and filled with quiet authority, "represents my son's life. He died so others could live, and he deserves the respect of this moment." Barnes, for the first time since the confrontation began, seemed to hesitate. His eyes flickered to the casket, then to the family standing at attention, and finally to the honor guard, who remained unwavering. The realization, slow but undeniable, began to sink in. This wasn't about authority. It wasn't about his job. It was about something far greater than protocol or efficiency. It was about honor, and in that moment, Barnes understood. The honor guard moved past him, the rhythm of their steps unbroken, the crowd silently parting to make way. The procession continued forward, not because of Barnes's permission, but because of something more powerful than any rule or regulation: the weight of sacrifice, the power of tradition, and the unyielding resolve of those who serve. As they reached the family, Sergeant Lawson gave a slight nod, a silent acknowledgement of their shared understanding. Thomas Harrison, his chest swelling with pride, returned the gesture, and for a brief moment time seemed to stand still. It was a moment of quiet victory, victory not over an adversary, but over something far more important: the preservation of honor, dignity, and the memory of those who had given everything. And as the honor guard continued their march to the hearse waiting at the terminal exit, the crowd, now fully aware of what they had witnessed, stood at attention, their respect palpably. Barnes, still standing in the background, watched with a mixture of regret and realization, knowing that in the end the only thing that truly mattered was the dignity of the fallen and the men and women who brought them home with honor. As the honor guard made their way toward the exit, the hum of activity in the terminal slowly returned. But the mood was different now. It wasn't the same bustling rush of impatient travelers or the clatter of footsteps heading toward gates. Instead, there was an overwhelming sense of reverence in the air, as if the entire terminal had collectively held its breath and exhaled in unison. People, once preoccupied with their own lives, now paused, acknowledging the profound moment they had just witnessed. Sergeant Lawson, his eyes fixed straight ahead, moved with the same unwavering discipline that had carried him through years of service. His steps were measured, each one deliberate, as if he was walking not just for himself, but for every man and woman who had served, for every family who had endured loss. His gaze never faltered, but inside, a quiet weight pressed on him. This moment was the culmination of a promise he had made to his fallen friend, Lieutenant Matt Harrison. As the procession reached the terminal's exit, Lawson's grip on the casket tightened slightly. He could feel the eyes of the crowd on him, the weight of their gaze pressing down with both respect and gratitude. He knew they understood now, as much as they could, the significance of what had just transpired. They had witnessed not just military ritual, but the essence of honor and sacrifice. And it wasn't just the uniformed soldiers who understood. It was the travelers, the families, the children who had witnessed Emma's simple salute. Their shared silence was a testament to that. Behind him, Thomas Harrison, the father, stood tall, his chest swelling with pride. His eyes, bloodshot and tired from years of military service, now glistened with unshed tears. The finality of this moment hit him hard, but there was also a profound peace in knowing that his son had been honored as he deserved. He glanced at Lawson, a silent thank you passing between them. The older man's military bearing remained steady, even in his grief. He had lost a son, but today, through Lawson's unwavering resolve, his son's life had been celebrated with the dignity it deserved. However, the confrontation with Barnes wasn't over yet. The moment of victory, the triumph of honor over bureaucracy, wasn't quite finished. As the honor guard reached the hearse, Barnes stood off to the side, his face flushed with frustration and regret. His earlier attempts to redirect the procession, his challenge to the honor guard's duty, were still fresh in his mind. But now, standing in the shadow of the casket, he couldn't deny the weight of the situation any longer. The public had seen the truth. They had seen what mattered. Barnes's earlier confidence had cracked under the pressure of Lawson's discipline, but now there was something more. Something had shifted inside him. He had come here to enforce order, but in the face of true sacrifice, he had been forced to reckon with the human cost of his decisions. The earlier arrogance had melted away, replaced by a quiet understanding. He had been wrong. His job had been to maintain order. Yes, but the true meaning of the situation was far more important than any protocol. As the honor guard completed their final salute and the casket was carefully loaded into the hearse, Barnes took a step forward. He hesitated for a moment, unsure of how to address the situation. His earlier outbursts still hung in the air, unresolved. But now he stood in the presence of something much greater than himself. This wasn't about him anymore. It was about respect. "Sergeant," Barnes began, his voice low but sincere, I didn't understand what this was about, what it truly meant." His words, though hesitant, were a rare admission of humility. Lawson, who had remained silent through the entire exchange, now turned to face him. His expression, though unreadable, softened just slightly. He didn't need to say anything. The moment spoke for itself. Barnes, his head slightly bowed, watched as the honor guard, now finished with their duty, took their final positions. The crowd, still gathered around, had witnessed the culmination of the entire exchange, the tension, the confrontation, and ultimately, the resolution. They had seen a man stand firm in his duty, and they had seen a system crack under the weight of humanity. Barnes was left standing on the sidelines, his earlier confidence shattered. But in its place, something stronger had taken root. As the hearse drove away, taking Lieutenant Matt Harrison to his final resting place, the crowd dispersed, but the atmosphere lingered. The air felt different, charged with a new energy, one that could only come from witnessing a powerful moment of respect, sacrifice, and honor. Barnes stood still, watching the hearse disappear from view, and for the first time, he understood. Some things were bigger than rules. Some things deserved to be protected no matter the cost. And for Sergeant Lawson, the mission was complete. He had brought his friend home, he had honored his promise, and in doing so, had taught everyone who witnessed it a lesson that would last a lifetime. Thank you for watching this powerful story unfold. What we've witnessed today goes beyond just a military procession. It's a reminder of the sacrifices made by those who serve, the respect they deserve, and the lessons we all can learn about honor and duty. But we want to hear from you. What did this story make you think about? How did the moments of tension, the conflict between protocol and respect, resonate with you? Have you ever experienced something that made you stop and reflect on the true meaning of sacrifice? We encourage you to share your thoughts in the comments below. Tell us where you're watching from, how this story impacted you, and what it means to you to honor those who serve. Your voice is important, and we love reading your insights. Whether you're a military veteran, someone who's lost a loved one, or simply someone moved by the values of respect and dignity, we want to hear your perspective. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and share this video with others who might appreciate this story. Join the conversation, and let's keep this important dialogue going. We look forward to reading your comments and seeing how this story has touched your heart.